This is the Nielsen Norman Group UX podcast.
I'm Therese Fessenden. For better or worse, AI has been at the center of so many conversations in UX lately. The hype is unbearable at times, and I find myself cringing at the trend to aimlessly throw AI tools at problems under the assumption it'll just make things work better. In a lot of cases, it doesn't. So it's been my mission over the past couple of years to pull the curtain back and get real about how AI works, what it can do, and more importantly, what it should do. In this episode, I chatted with Alexander Knoll, co-founder of Condens.io, and we talked about all of the realistic ways that AI can support UX research. Condens is a UX research tool that makes it easy for teams to organize, analyze, and share insights from research studies all in one place, along with some AI-powered tools to help with the process. We talk about the strengths and weaknesses of AI tools, what it means to use them responsibly, and how researchers can stay sharp by focusing on the things that humans still do best, connecting the dots with context, identifying nuance, and building deeper understanding. If you've ever wondered when to lean on AI or when to double down on human insight, this conversation offers a thoughtful perspective. With that, here's Alex.
Alex, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm excited to chat with you today, pick your brain about everything you guys are doing at Condens and just get to know you as well. So where are you calling in from, by the way?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be on the show. I'm calling in from Munich. Condens is based in Munich. The entire team is based in Munich, Germany. So in the south of Germany, close to the Alps.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. It's on my list to visit Germany, but also to visit near the Alps. So excited to have you here. And thanks for making the time. So Alex, for those unfamiliar with your background and unfamiliar with how you came to found Condens, could you share a little bit about your journey into UX and what brought you here?
Sure. Originally, I have a business background. I studied business administration, so it's probably a kind of weird journey for me to end up in UX. My first jobs were in finance. I supported startups getting venture capital and did different things, but always was attracted to the startup world. And this is when I then became a product manager later, worked in early stage startups, one in particular, which was a hardware startup, hardware and software, which is very interesting, but also challenging, pre-product market fit. And in that role, I talked to customers a lot. It was very sales related. Obviously, we're trying to find product market fit and trying to understand where our solution could potentially fit in, which problems we're going to solve. So it was naturally research was a part of it, but I didn't know how to call it back then. It was just part of my job. And then at some point, after I got a bit of work experience, together with my two co-founders, we decided to found our own company and do something of our own, which we were always excited about. And by accident, we ended up in UX research. Again, I didn't know about UX research until 2019, until my co-founder who studied design sort of introduced it a bit to us, and he told us a bit about his struggles. And this was basically our starting point. We realized, hey, maybe there's something to it. And then we started our own discovery phase. And this is how we got into Condens.
Yeah, on that topic, I would love for you to share a bit about what you all do at Condens for our audience and, what it is that obviously research repositories are a big one. But if you could just give a very quick introduction, that would be amazing.
Yeah, Condens basically solves two problems. One is how do researchers or anyone who does research go from raw data to something that they can share with their stakeholders, insights, reports, results, and everything in between. And this supports the entire process from, we talked about transcription, translation, finding and highlighting interesting aspects, matching them together. We've built an entire workflow of how you can make sense of data and support all of that sense making, which is very complex in human beings and requires a lot of combination of visual and other skills to end up with valuable insights. So this is one thing that Condens supports. And the second aspect is the research repository. So this whole idea of how can an organization make the best use of the insights and data that they already have, and bring this to as many people as possible, or to the right people and at the right time. So we have a separate interface dedicated for stakeholders, where they can, it's almost like a landing page where they can, look through the latest research and browse through what's been happening, and then search with natural language to find the insights that they're looking for. And we will see very positive feedback from our customers, where they see like, hey, we can have even more impact with our research and bringing it closer to everyone in the organization.
Absolutely. And I think that's incredible. Like the ability for people to do that, like, even though AI has obviously been around for a while, I think actually starting to apply it to these contexts is a fairly new phenomenon. And I am coming from, a background where for years, the idea of a research repository was simply like a shared drive. We just have folders and folders and folders and folders of just, either the actual transcripts or videos or recordings. And maybe if you're lucky, you have the actual insights summarized somewhere so that you don't have to sift through 500 different interviews, to find what you need to learn. So obviously, this is an incredible opportunity for a lot of researchers to be able to not only navigate and use it for your own research analysis, which obviously that's a very big endeavor in itself, but also getting other people in the organization to engage, right? That's been a timeless problem, I guess is the best way to put it, where it's always been a challenge for UX professionals and product folks even to get other people to engage with the evidence, with the research, and make sure that we're making decisions with data and not assumptions. So to be able to lower the barrier, as you say, is incredible and awesome. And recently you've co-written an article with us here at NNG and published an article that I think is great. We'll link to that in the show notes. And one of the things you cover is the fact that Condens is integrating AI into the research process. So from your perspective, could you share a bit, like what is the role that you think AI should play in the UX research process? Because I know right now there's a lot of debate about should AI be involved, and if it's involved, what are the risks? So I know it's a very big question, but I'd love your thoughts on what that role should be.
Yeah, I think with any technology change, like bigger technology change, like we're seeing with AI, there is this question of how exactly will we use the technology. And I think it's super important to spend time thinking about precisely what are the applications that we want to have and want to use, and what are the risks and downsides. I think to summarize our approach, or how we think AI can be used, is really as an assistant to support with scoped subtasks of the research process. What that means is it can support as part of the analysis process, for example, to find related highlights of something where you find an interesting quote, but you want to see, hey, did other people mention something like that as well? And you don't want to read manually through all of the other interviews or transcripts. Or it can help you, once you identified a couple of quotes, help you identify themes and patterns in the data. And at the same time, we realized AI has its limitations. It's hallucinating. It's like coming up with like things that are not backed by the data that you provided, the raw data. And it sounds good on surface, like the output sounds reasonable and plausible, but it's not always the quality that you would want to expect. And as researchers, we have to be careful of that as well. So having the human in the loop is, of course, is super important. And how we see it is more like an interaction between the human and the AI. It's like almost playing ping pong and sort of handing data and ideas off to each other. But this checking of the human and like correcting things, adapting things, this is a super important aspect. And this is sort of the vision that we're believing in and that we're building towards various. You can see on social media, you can see all types of visions of where AI might potentially go, up until the point where it's like a one-click analysis of your research project. We don't see that backed.
Yeah. So on the topic of scoped subtasks, and by the way, I also like the metaphor of thinking of it as an assistant. I think even Kate Moran has done several talks at this point talking about how, AI should be thought of as an intern in a way that is helping you sift through a lot of data. Obviously works very quickly, which is really great and beneficial. But on the flip side, like you're saying, it can hallucinate. So, where would you say, I know you mentioned the technology is not quite there yet. Where does it fall short where it's like clear that this is a task that a human being should still be doing?
Yeah, I think we have to consider at least three limitations in the context of research. One is AI doesn't have the context that you as a human have. Think of your organization, the goals your organization has, the strategy, everything that you already know. All of that is like context that you have and that you use even subconsciously in order to analyze data. And this is, of course, super hard to provide this additional context. Sometimes that's not even written data. If it were, it would be way too much to give to AI. So that's one thing. So that's why I think AI can be used for tasks that don't require a lot of context. Transcription is a good example. I mean, even though it's not generative AI, but still, like, you have like an audio and you turn it into text, and you don't need a ton of context. Yes, maybe a couple of technical terms, but other than that, you don't need a ton of context to do that. So that's the first limitation. The second limitation is more like a technical limitation in terms of input that you can provide. Large language models do have technical limitations, and it's roughly equivalent to like 10 hours of interview recordings. Beyond that, AI will automatically decide what part of the context it will use in order to solve a task. And then you have a bias in there. So you have to be aware of that. So just, I don't know, giving it all of your research from the last 3 years and asking it to, I don't know, come up with the pain points or usability issues or whatever you want, is probably not a good idea. So scoping it down to maybe one session, one project, and wherever you can find like ways to reduce the amount of input required to solve that task.
Yeah. I think that's super helpful to think about too, like scoping it down, giving it a task that's very narrow and focused to the data that you're providing to it. Because again, I think what you mentioned earlier with hallucination, it kind of takes liberties and it's like, well, what sounds plausible, and kind of provides a plausible reason, although it may not be accurate, right? And lots of things can be plausible, but even two ends of a spectrum of truth, right? Like what comes to mind for me is, at least in the realm of sycophancy or the tendency for AI to just try to say something that pleases the prompter, right? One of the things I noticed, at least in a comparison recently for like synthetic users versus real users, right? If you ask a synthetic user, like, did you go through all of the data in this particular course or whatever? Did you take all the course modules if we're like studying someone's, taking a course online? And the AI might say, yes, I did. It was very helpful. And then you compare that to a real human being. It's like, no, I got busy. Life got busy. I did 1 or I did 0. So, I think like you're saying, there's a bit more liberty that can be taken when there is a broader subset of data to pull from. But if you give it something very narrow and something very tangible, right, it's a forcing function in a way to stay closer to some sort of core truth or ground truth, right? And maybe that's seems like that's a really big risk still with more generalized process.
Absolutely. And having this scoped approach also has a third benefit, which is it's easier for you as a human to check the results. Like if you ask it to summarize like one very long quote, and that's easy for you to do, right? You can just read the quote and then see if the summary matches. But if you ask it to analyze a research project for you based out of 20 interviews, how can you know the results are valid without actually going through the interviews, or at least partially going through the interviews? And then the question is the time saving actually as big as compared to doing part of it yourself? So this ease of checking the results and ease of changing the results as well, because we have to assume that at least part of the results will be wrong. So how easy is it for me to maybe adapt part of it, take out a couple of those quotes that it sort of mapped to a certain area or rearrange them is a third thing we should definitely consider in the research process.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned something important, which I think people sort of skirt around it when they're talking about it, is the balance between the time saving and accuracy. And obviously, when you go toward time saving or you skew a little bit heavier on the time saving side, then you lose a combination of both accuracy and comprehension even, right? Because you're essentially offloading that responsibility to a system instead of taking the time to, as a researcher, own that and make full sense of it. Do you have any other recommendations for, how we can stay like sharp and engaged, despite this pressure to just like outsource as much as we can to AI?
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes that I currently have in mind is, "Don't outsource the thinking or the understanding to AI," and this totally relates to that. And I totally get it. It's convenient. Like you give AI a bit of context or a bit of text, and it does a certain job for you, which on the surface looks good and may even to a certain extent be good. And I totally get it. And I feel that myself sometimes, where I'll be like, hey, I could use ChatGPT for that like difficult task, or play around with it. And sometimes it's totally fine to, for example, get started, have like a starting point, and again, play ping pong with AI sort of and bounce ideas. But I think at this current state of technology, it's still important that humans do the thinking, and both for probably for our personal benefit, but also for the results that we're expecting. If yes, you could save a ton of time by letting AI run your analysis. The question is, if you think of the value of user research overall, will that be achieved? Like, will you make better decisions based on that? Will you differentiate from your competitors based on that? And this is definitely where I don't see value being generated. Yes, if you only focus on speed, and if speed is the only thing that you optimize for, totally go for AI. But I don't think speed is the thing we should optimize for. And I feel like we have put too much focus on speed recently and not too much focus on quality and differentiation and unique insights that can actually make a difference, and maybe a bit slower and definitely will be harder, require more thinking, but in the end will likely generate more unique, outstanding products and services that have a competitive advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I feel like I've also been leaning a little bit here on like risks of AI, but obviously you at Condens and the team at Condens have been incorporating AI because obviously it has some value. So I would love for you to share a bit, what are some of the ways that you've seen, AI really has been proven to be particularly helpful? And in fact, it's like we can even shout from the rooftops, like, please use AI for this, because why are we doing this still by hand? Like, I know you mentioned transcripts, obviously, like that's something I'm thrilled as someone who's been in research long enough to have luckily, seen the benefit and really have, been able to proclaim the benefit. Like, wow, why has anyone been here taking hand notes only, right? When you can couple hand notes with transcripts, right? And obviously there's lots of tools out there for that. But, are there other tasks that you think, are really worth it, and obviously have been worth it, for you all at Condens as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're big fans of AI, and I know that me talking about like limitations and being cautious and so on can easily be seen as we're critical or skeptical of AI. That's totally not the case. We just want to find that sweet spot where we use it for the right things. And there's a ton of applications where we see it's totally valuable, especially those tedious tasks that are time consuming, are not adding a ton of value, but still have to be done. Again, I give you an example. You're analyzing an interview, you find an interesting quote, you remember that someone else mentioned something along those lines, but you don't know exactly where. And AI can help you find it based on the content based on the semantics. And this can save you a ton of time, and you don't have to go through other interviews. It can help you with getting started. I know that for some people, it can be overwhelming to be in front of 15 1-hour interviews and see all of that and being overwhelmed by all of the data. So having a starting point can be very, very, very valuable. And not only for analysis. I mean, Condens obviously is also a repository, and this is where we see the search, especially for people like outside the research team, like stakeholders who come in, who just want to learn about customers and users without having to know which exact keywords to use, which exact filters to use. They can use natural language to ask a question about, hey, what do we know about our enterprise customers? Or what are the recent mentions from our customers in Spain? And ask an open question and get some the latest insights backed by evidence. So it's really lowering the barrier to access insights for everyone in the organization. And this is, I think, what we've all been working for the last years and we'll continue to work for. So I think one of the big benefits of researchers is that they have so much context of the organization. They know where the organization is heading. They know what the big issues are that try to be solved. They know all of the tools and people and data sources. So connecting that and bringing it together and ideally forming like a coherent view on the problems, opportunities of the organization. I think this is a tremendous opportunity and might be one sort of future vision for where researchers can be going. So maybe they will save some time when the actual working on a study and working with the actual data and doing less of those redundant tedious tasks. And can spend more time in elevating the impact of research in the organization overall, be it through bringing in other data sources, doing more deeper connections of data. I think this is also one of the limitations of AI is that even if it were not hallucinating, it would still likely produce very superficial results in a way that it can see. Let's go back to the example where we have an interview, we have people talking about potential pain points. It can identify obvious cases where a participant talks about pain points and maybe mentions pain points or I'm struggling with X, Y, but finding those underlying pain points that are not so obvious, that where you require maybe context of the field, of the profession that person is having and the organization, and seeing those non-obvious things and then turning them to an insight, and then later the organization can use that to build something or create something new. I think this is where a lot of the value is, and this is where AI cannot support yet. It can support it with other things. The value generation of researchers will definitely change.
Definitely. And I think it's really a positive shift, I think. And I know that there are a lot of AI, or rather not AI, but research purists, perhaps, who are a bit apprehensive about applying AI, but for good reason, right? There are lots of limitations like you've shared, and I think those are valid and important to acknowledge right now. So obviously, it's not capable currently of replacing researchers, although there are lots of websites making very bold claims, that you won't need to do research anymore. But I do want to kind of ask another question, which is, while it's not capable now, do you think it will be? And if yes, what does that mean for us? And if not, also, what does that mean for us?
You're absolutely right. Right now, AI is not capable of replacing a human researcher, a well-trained human researcher. Will it be? We don't know. This is the difficult thing with these disruptive technologies. You cannot predict them. No one predicted ChatGPT more than 2 years ago. And at the same time, what we've been seeing until now was more like incremental improvements. So although people expected these disruptive improvements to continue, what we have seen was more incremental improvements. There were bug fixes, there were maybe a bit better quality. You could apply it also to images and videos and so on. This is all nice, but we didn't see this exponential improvement continue. And we at Condens here expect to be required for researchers to potentially be replaced is a totally different technological foundation for AI. the technological foundation that we have currently is like this word predicting model, large language models, is unlikely going to be the one that potentially replaces researchers. So this is one of those things where it may happen. It's definitely likely to happen at some point. Can we know when it happens? No, we can't. It could be in 5 years, could be 10 years, could be more than that. So the best thing we can do right now is work with what we have right now and continue to base our assumptions and our working models based on what we have right now, not worrying about being replaced. Yeah, that might be the case for other functions as well. But this is a problem we have when we have it, which we don't know when we have it.
Right. Yeah. In a way, it's like, can you predict the future? It's like, no, we can't. But I do think, based on some of the things you've mentioned before, right? First off, getting people to acknowledge, one, the risk of AI, which is that it hallucinates still, even now. I think even as recently as a couple months ago, we're recording this now in April, but a couple months ago, there was a declaration that a lot of generative AI is wrong 60% of the time. And that's more than half of the time it is incorrect. I mean, obviously it's still correct a lot of times, but it's enough to go into it with a healthy skepticism of what you're about to find. Now, will that get better? Probably, but it is interesting to think about the role that we have as researchers. And so you mentioned, the idea of context. I think people often think, oh, well, eventually we're going to have a knowledge repository big enough where context is just going to be inferred. But here's my devil's advocate kind of challenge to that. One of the things that makes user research so valuable is our ability to learn more about how people think and not just what they, freely offer up or say. And some of that comes from, interviews and reading between the lines, like you're mentioning, some of this deeper analysis. The other side of it too, what comes to mind for me is more of the observational research that, in the form of field studies or in the form of, really understanding the diary studies in more detail. And right now, as far as we know, AI tools are not currently capable of analyzing video input data, like perhaps generating video, it's getting better at, obviously, but understanding and analyzing visual data and connecting it to non-visual data, like that's something that's quite challenging. I mean, even for a human being, that's challenging, right? And, as a researcher, you build that skill over time to make these sorts of connections. So to me, it seems like those sorts of analysis tasks are still very much stronger when done by a human. And the other idea that you mentioned is, connecting people to people. I mean, it's one thing for an AI bot to tell you what it saw or how it impacts the company, but I think it's another to be able to talk to an actual human being, right? And to build empathy and rapport. And as far as I know, AI can emulate that, but it's not the same as building relationships. So who knows? Maybe that will change in the future. But for now, it certainly seems like these are things that, as human beings, we have a tremendous strength, and humanity has a tremendous strength as a whole.
I can totally relate. And I mean, one of the reasons Condens is at the position that we're in right now is that we have such a strong relationship with our users and customers and built them over the last 5 years. Do I want to replace them with AI? Totally not. This is so valuable, and so many of those people have provided so much valuable feedback to Condens that ended up in the product. That's not something we would want to outsource to AI to. Definitely not this point. Not sure if we would ever want to. And maybe to add one more point is there's a lot of thinking about, AI, can it replace the job, or can it replace certain tasks? Can it replace like analyzing interviews, to go back to the example we talked about? I would also like to mention that this focus on the output can also be misleading, like just generating this report or just generating this insight. Oftentimes this is seen as, or set equal to the value of research. But we definitely see that that's not necessarily the case. Oftentimes, the value of research is going through the process, looking at the data, doing the actual thinking, doing the connection. This creates a much deeper type of learning than just being presented the results, sitting in a presentation and seeing like, hey, these are our 5 insights and this is what we learned. It's a different way of learning. And I always encourage the people that we work with to get stakeholders involved, knowing this is not always easy and everyone is busy. But going through the process really creates, as you say, builds this empathy and puts us into the shoes of the people that we build for, and helps not only that with the decision that we're now trying to make and that we're doing the research for and try to get like one answer for, but it helps with so many more decisions because we have this image in mind and consciously and unconsciously use that knowledge to base decisions. And I think, that's the point I'm trying to make is we should not only optimize for like the output and get the output as fast as possible. The process is part of the value as well, and being part of it is helping to shape that image of the user.
Even like, let's talk about time savings again too, right? There's the time savings that you get from getting AI to do tedious tasks. Obviously, great use case for that. But there's also time savings to just having inherent knowledge that's reliable, right? As opposed to, let me type this into my AI tool. That's time we're now losing because we've outsourced our knowledge to some other, system. And until decision-making is outsourced to them, which, that's a whole nother ethical question. And I don't know how many companies are going to be super comfortable with that. That's still going to need human beings to be those knowledge holders and to be able to help expedite some of that decision making. So, I think there's something to that.
Yeah. I'm really afraid that we use those time savings as a misleading metric. It can be helpful in some areas, but it can be really misleading in others. And if all we optimize for is time savings, I don't think we fully understand the value of research, to be honest. Let me give you a story about that. Like when we started Condens, or before we started Condens, we saw the opportunity to build something for researchers. The 3 of us founders, we spent 4 weeks full time just to talk to researchers, conduct interviews, learn about what they're doing, and spend time with them. And I feel like those 4 weeks were so well spent. This was building the foundation for years of product work, where we had such a holistic understanding of what they're doing, what their pain points are, how their processes look like. And we could use that for so many decisions where we would usually we would start research for this because how do they do this? What exactly does this process look like? But we knew so much already. So this is, again, the point that I'm trying to make is is research about answering the next question or making the next decision, or is it about building a holistic view of the people that you build for that helps with many more decisions, and maybe comes up with unique opportunities and ideas that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yes, I love that. Thinking of research as a foundation for future decision making, not just one incremental choice. And I mean, maybe that even speaks to the entire state of our industry as a whole, right? There's so many examples where it's all about just one more conversion or just one more click, where if we're being a bit more, long-term in our view, a bit more holistic in our understanding, then we'll probably make better decisions that ultimately serve our organizations way better than simply the next click, right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And let's make sure research does not become an answers factory. Exactly like this incremental, then you get the next answer, you have the next question, you get the next answer. That's totally fine, but it's very short-sighted and only focuses on the answer versus the process and the whole understanding. I agree. There's opportunity in this different approach. At the same time, I see that for researchers in organizations, it's difficult to implement that. There's, quarterly earnings reports and OKRs and milestones and short-term things that you have to achieve. So it's not always easy to implement that. But being clear about where you're going and where you're heading, I think is important, because it's easy to be dragged into that short-sighted, produce the next answer kind of rhythm. And then if we follow that, then it's really hard for researchers to argue for the value of research or why we shouldn't be replaced.
Right. Yes. Yeah. We're doing a lot more than just delivering the next answer. We're building a foundation for great decision making. Yeah. So, Alex, this has been so helpful and such a fun conversation to hear about the work that you're doing at Condens. To close out, I would love, if you had to give advice to researchers, especially those who are maybe early in their career or more junior, maybe they're trying to stay relevant. And right now there's a lot of questions about tools and roles evolving. Could you give like a piece of advice to folks who are just entering this space?
Yeah, I think it's easy to be dragged away by all of the marketing talk about AI. I mean, we talked a lot about AI, and it's definitely a huge opportunity, and they should use it. But at the same time, I think it's still super important for researchers to have the foundation, the methodologies, and all of the rigor that comes with it. And I think in the early, at least that's my view, in the early years of a career, this is where a lot of the learning happens still. You usually have some learning from your education and background, but this is still where you learn a lot, which research method to apply, how to do that exact study. The second thing, and I see that more and more, is going beyond the actual conducting of a study and growing beyond that. And this comes back to this connector, being resourceful in terms of knowing which tools there are in the organization, which data there is in the organization, making use of that, and connecting research really to the big problems, opportunities that the company is working on. This is related also to research ops in a certain way, building the foundation, making research more productive. So going beyond the actual conducting of research and growing beyond that, I think is going to be more and more relevant in the future.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's helpful to think of it in that way, right? That there's a lot of growth that's going to happen here. And if I were to just kind of say it more bluntly, at least if I were to talk to my past self, when I was a young researcher and designer, I would tell myself to be ready to make a lot of mistakes and use those mistakes as a way to learn and get better. But obviously, if there are ways to avoid the mistakes, that's always nice, right? So like that was something I wish I did more of. As for me, I learned through a lot of mistakes, but I also wish I had spent more time learning and like proactively, like looking for information, learning about different principles and practices. And so not to like be completely shamelessly plugging NNG stuff here, but I do, want to share that if you are interested in learning about, say, AI for research or AI for design, like if you are a practitioner wanting to apply these things to your work, we have some courses on that. And we also have, if you're very, very new, we have UX basic training courses. And we're certainly not the only provider of those things, although I will, have those links in the notes if you're interested. But, there are lots and lots of great resources out there, even free ones, where you can start learning and building that methodology, right? Because like to your point, it's about using these tools wisely and knowing what value they can bring at each step. And it's not as simple as being an answer generator, right? It's about knowing specific pieces of information that can help you make better questions, right? And I know I'm always a big fan of making better questions. But Alex, if people would love to follow you or learn more about the work you're doing at Condens, is there somewhere that you can point people to?
Yeah, I'm active on LinkedIn. You can follow me. I think you'll put my link to the show notes. Please engage, connect with me. And I'm also talking about research, also posting questions that I have myself, because we're all constantly learning. So I'd love to engage and interact there. At Condens, we also do meetups regularly and online events. We have one coming up about the impact of research, like how can we show the business value and impact of research, and others. So if you're interested in that, just go to our website and see what's up there.
Yep, and that's Condens.io. Is that correct?
Condens.io, exactly.
Yes. Awesome. Well, Alex, thank you so much for sharing your perspective, giving us a really no-nonsense look at what AI can do, what it can't do, and how we can make ourselves better practitioners as a whole. It's been so refreshing to have this talk with you. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Therese. It was a lot of fun, and happy to stay connected.
That was Alexander Knoll, co-founder of Condens. If you'd like to learn more about the work they're doing or check out some of their upcoming events and meetups, head to condens.io. That's CONDENS.io. You can also find and follow Alex on LinkedIn. His posts often spark thoughtful discussions on UX research, AI, and organizational impact. You can find all of those links in the show notes. And of course, don't forget that NNG has thousands of free articles and videos on all sorts of topics, ranging from UX research, design, service design, strategy, and several articles on the role of AI in experience design. You can find all of those and some upcoming courses on those topics at www.nngroup.com. That's NNGROUP.com, along with links to our weekly email newsletter and training events. This show is hosted and produced by me, Therese Fessenden. All editing and post-production is by Chrissy Richardson. That's it for today's show. Until next time, remember, keep it simple.